Back to the Atma Paradigm. We continue with part 4 of our series entitled The Universe and Beyond. And our title today comes from last time, the virtual reality analogy, and this is part B of that, Immersion and Freedom. Now last time I suggested that one benefit of modern society, being familiar with the various aspects of high technology, is that we have been introduced to quite a radical new way of thinking about reality, what it is and how it works and how we experience it. And today we're going to continue with such analogies, principally focused on actual virtual reality. Now throughout the series of the Atma Paradigm, we proposed that each of us is an entity of consciousness, i.e. consciousness that is non-physical, non-biological, non-neural. And that we allow our sense of existence to be defined by identification with our bodies and the various experiences that we undergo within life in these bodies. Experiences that we are made aware of by how they are presented to us within the interface of our minds. And I think that this depiction of our existence can be well described using the analogy of virtual reality gaming. Now, an analogy doesn't serve as proof of a principle, but a good analogy can help to explain ideas and concepts that are tricky to visualize or to comprehend. And of course, I stress that I'm using VR as an analogy with all its limitations, and I'm not suggesting that we live in a simulation of any sort. To this end, I used our last session to establish first the way that reality operates. How we inhabit a real world, but one that is malleable and influenced by our individual, our group, and our aggregated intentions. And in particular, we presented the idea of the punctuated nature of reality and the role that time plays in facilitating the change and updating of information into the manifestation of each new moment. And we presented more details on the roles and potency of aggregated intention as the source of the particular data packets that define the specifics of reality at each of those now moments. And we looked into a kind of feedback loop that exists involving consciousness and how when each conscious entity experiences reality in this moment, it contributes thoughts and desires and emotions back into the aggregated intention for all Atmas. And nature uses that updated aggregate to calculate the data packets for all of reality in the next moment. So the conclusion is that we're all participating in a very big and connected picture of existence. And I believe that the model we presented has kind of wide significance for both physics and metaphysics, because it suggests ways by which matter may be manipulated other than by the standard physical processes, and we'll talk about some of those a little later. Let me briefly take you back to the diagram we used to model the concepts. We simplified the picture into a couple of layers, a bit like the layers we analysed within the TV projection. One was the field of Prakriti and the other a field of aggregated intention. Essentially, these are like this. Prakriti is the raw, total state of material ingredients, providing the potential for the manifestation of all objects in the universe. So it provides the set of potential ingredients. It is the material cause of the cosmos. And then we have aggregated intention as the sum of all the interests, the inclinations, and the desires of all the Atmas that are associated with this universe. And this is the efficient cause, because this is what actually defines how things are manifest, in what form they are manifest. Now, all of these intentions are held in this field in the form of guna data. So a guna data as a full specification of every desire, of every Atma, encoded in almost unlimited combinations of these three guna modes. And the essential principle of our paradigm is that material reality is the manifestation of the combination of material ingredients with intentional specifying information supplied, which are supplied by the gunas. Now, we defined the paramanu as the smallest unit of Prakriti that can hold guna data and thereby manifest itself with the properties of the protophysical tanmatras and also the Mahabhuta elements. So in this way, the totality of all the different little paramanus manifest the objects of this world as physically observable to our senses. Now, the Vedas offer some statements about the nature of time, and one is that the paramanu is considered to be the minute form of time. And what that really means is that time provides each paramanu with the ability to vary its data content. And this interaction of time, matter and information gives rise to everything. Everything that is part of our perceptions. It gives rise to the measurement and the concepts of change and movement, and it gives rise to everything that we attribute to the passing of time. Time is therefore experienced sequentially, that the information content is changing from one moment to the next. And from our perspective, as non-temporal witnesses, we observe that as the flow of time from past through the present to the future. And it's kind of paradoxical that it is the fact of our being able to witness the passing of time that proves that we as a conscious entity are non-temporal. Because only that which is not changed by time can experience the changes that passing time forces on matter. So, under this spell of this change, we conceive of motion in a particular way. And we explained how matter manifests in this punctuated fashion. The input of guna data from the field of aggregated intention activates the latent paramanu. The paramanu takes on the packet of data and thereby exhibits properties of the tanmatras, and then manifesting all the properties as a Mahabhuta object. And here it is in this position. Its form and state determined by the guna data that it holds. Now, everything in the universe is constituted of the gunas, the properties and manifestations of the paramanus, all our thoughts and intentions, all our actions, interactions and reactions. Everything is composed of and defined by the gunas. You could joke that the gunas are like Donald Trump. They make up everything. The guna of tamas acts to enforce change, the change imposed by entropy, that things move from a state of order to disorder. So each time the moment is updated, there may be a tiny increase in tamas, producing a slight deterioration with every moment. Here's the effect speeded up. Dramatic, eh? Tamas increasing at every second. But the effect of tamas can be mitigated by sattva. We saw that in the experiments of the rice experiment. Remember, I placed the same amount of cooked rice into 2 tubs. One was praised with gratitude and appreciation. In effect, what I was trying to do was imbue it with the qualities related to sattva, which is to do with sustenance and preservation. And the other, the fool, was verbally abused and denigrated because I was trying to accentuate the effect of tamas and deterioration on it. And the results indicate that the guna data nature of my intention and my actions and expression of either appreciation or abuse can be transferred into these physical objects in a way that slows down or speeds up the expected rate of chemical activity. So this indicates that matter can be manipulated by a non-physical process if that involves intention, which is used to vary the guna composition of an object. And change can also be made to an object's location. Motion, for instance, involves activation of the different paramanus within the grid of Prakriti. So we've got our paramanu manifest in one position there, and when that paramanu's moment is over, it's wound up back to its latent state, awaiting the next packet of data. But this time, the data activates the paramanu on an adjacent point on the grid, which then manifests as what appears to be the same full object, but in a new location. So the paramanus, these exist at the smallest possible distance, that they can be for their individual manifestation. But there is no crossing of intervening space, if you can think that there may be even intervening space. There is a discrete new manifestation in a new location on the grid, albeit very close to the previous. Now, perhaps this is something for the mathematicians amongst you, that this way of modelling motion resolves those famous or infamous paradoxes of the Greek philosopher Zeno. And it resolves his paradoxes because it undermines the standard conception that an object must reach a halfway point before it reaches the next point on its travel. You can apply the paradox and see how this resolves it for yourself if it's a bit of homework. All embodied creatures on earth pay heed to the movement. We're all interested in movement because it's crucial for our own activities, as we move around, navigating across the terrain, as we find food, catch prey, escape predators. We're attentive to what we think are the laws of motion, how things move in a particular way. But the laws of motion that we have are only our way of modelling what we expect as the natural movement of objects if they move according to our physical way of dealing with them. So modelling movement according to our standard expectations doesn't define actual laws of nature. It just defines how we are modelling what we expect nature to do. And the standard way of modelling movement misses out on other ways that objects can be made to move. Because according to our metaphysical model, instead of the object appearing in an adjacent location to its previous place, as we showed before, the object could manifest in a surprising, say, distant location in the corner here in the next moment. That might seem to violate so-called laws of physics, but it violates only the expectancy of the standard way of modelling motion. It doesn't actually violate the real laws of nature. Rather, it takes advantage of the laws of nature. So our metaphysical model can handle the incorporation of physics, but it can also incorporate other incidents which you might say are anomalous motion. For instance, there are many reports of UFO sightings. And what they often say is that they saw the craft suddenly moving in an odd way, accelerating quickly from nothing, or changing direction in a kind of right angle way, which is inexplicable. And our current idea and notion of motion just cannot deal with that. Now, I'm not trying to say whether these reports are real or not, but what I am saying is if they are, perhaps what they're observing is a technology based on the principles of the metaphysics or the physics that I've shown here. And we'll hear later how other processes can exploit these natural laws. Now, I think it's really important to appreciate the value of this pulsating model of reality, especially when we're approaching this analogy of virtual reality. Why? Because VR is delivered in that way, in digital, electronic data packets projected on some form of screen or headset, however we see it. Whatever way, it's a sequence of pulsating data producing ever-changing imagery. And of course that imagery is getting more and more realistic and immersive. And if our current iterations of virtual reality can do that, no wonder real reality captivates us. Now again, please remember that all of the following analysis is an extended analogy. I'll be eking out of the life of the metaphor of VR as many pertinent examples as I can, but it remains an analogy, and I'm not suggesting we live in such a simulation. The world we inhabit is real, even though we have a subjective experience of it, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Secondly, the parallels to virtual reality that I'll be referring to often relate to the picture of reality described in various Vedic texts. Some of them serve to illustrate ideas that we've already discussed, and I hope we've established them, but others suggest logical ways of thinking about new ideas and extrapolations of those concepts. So some of them will be new in this presentation. Now, for our analogy, we're going to kind of focus on the genre of multiplayer virtual reality games. And we start with thinking about why such games would be created. Why would you bother going about that? Well, to attract those wishing to experience something out of the ordinary for themselves, a scenario where they can take on a different persona, and where the player can enjoy quests and missions which are far more interesting than their day job, and where they can develop new abilities and powers to vanquish enemies or to create civilizations, or perhaps steal a car. These games generate an exciting world. Sometimes it's realistic to life on Earth, and sometimes it's fantastical in space or mythology. But in all cases, these worlds, like our own universe, are intended to satisfy the sentient beings who want to inhabit and use it. So games are commercial, they want to sell as many people as possible, but they do tend each to be geared for certain interests. None of them can claim to cover all interests. But that's the challenge for the Vedic concept of the universe. The universe has to provide an environment for every Atma in it. Every Atma to fulfill the scope of all its desires and aspirations, whatever those might be. Now, the basic premise of VR games is to pander to these desires and aspirations, which actually are the natural proclivities of consciousness, because they involve the idea that I want to experience and enjoy activities, sensory gratification, emotions, relationships, fulfillment, and also to express my sense of agency, my creativity, my control, my achievement, possession, and domination even. So even though particular games may seem to serve a niche concept, virtual reality still has to, whatever the game is, it has to offer the players quite broad potential within that world, with as many permutations, choices, and experience as possible. Now, how do they go about doing all that? Well, the first thing involves market analysis. They look, what's of interest? What desires aren't being satisfied in the gaming market? What are the trends? What's happening? Where will things move? So the Vedic idea is similar, that our universe is produced to satisfy the already existing interests of a total batch of clientele, of innumerable Atmas that will be its users. And we described that the aggregated intention of all these Atmas predates the start of the universe. In fact, it is the impetus for the universe to be formed. Matter in its raw potential state of unmanifested Prakriti does not activate itself. It requires the injection of aggregated intention. So this is the sequence for the gamers or the gaming developers. First, there is analysis of the overall intentions of the clientele, defining what these people will want to do. Then the game designers work on the various avatar characters that can be used to accomplish those tasks and fulfill those kind of aspirations. And I should note that in this session I'm using the word avatar solely as it's used in the context of gaming, i.e. to refer to the virtual character that one adopts within a particular game. Now, although the original term avatar has kind of deeper theological significance, a Sanskrit term that can be translated as one who descends from a higher realm, you could say that the term is sort of appropriate in gaming, because what's happening is that the real human is descending into this virtual existence. Anyway, once the game has clarified the types of avatars that it requires, it then goes about conceiving and designing the environment that will accommodate those avatars and their activities. And that's why the Atma Paradigm follows that order of topics. Consciousness and what it wants, then we considered the life forms, and then we looked at the environment for those life forms, the universe. So, in the same way, we say the universe analyzes the ideas and interests of all its clientele, the Atmas, and uses that information to design and develop all the details of the entire cosmos. And the intentions of each individual Atma within the aggregated total are analysed and categorised and encoded as guna data. And this encoded guna data becomes embedded in the starting point and subsequent unfolding of the formation and development of the universe. But guna data, as we said, doesn't just define the big stuff like planets and so on, or the environments as we enjoy on Earth. It also defines all the forms of embodiment that the Atmas may get to experience, each of these forms has their own potential skills and attributes, and also their limitations. And nature has a really smart way of doing that analysis. And we've shown this triangle before. It's our spectrum triangle of the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. And we use that to represent, the spectrum represents a kind of total potential of all the combinations and mixings of these gunas. And we've just overlaid here a three-way grid. And that produces all these smaller triangles within the overall grid triangle. So each of those smaller triangles represents a specific set of guna data that encapsulates a particular group of desires, interests and aspiration. And nature provides a species type for each of those little grid triangles. Now, this is just a kind of illustrative way of conveying the principle. The Vedas suggest that even though the total number of all Atmas in the universe is some incredibly huge number we can't even imagine, the variations of all their aspirations can be accommodated within just 8,400,000 guna-based species types. And remember, of course, that the Vedas define a species differently to the other definitions we discussed in part 3, biological and so on. So we're talking guna-based species types here. Now, there are types which are more towards the tamas corner, and they're more likely to be species or species types that are stationary or sluggish or dull in awareness. And there's some that are more towards the rajas corner, and they may be more active, maybe more aggressive, maybe even quick-witted. And then there's those towards the sattva area who are likely to be more placid and offering benefit to other species and maybe participative in relationships and with more awakened awareness. So each species type, each one of these little triangles has unique features for experience and enjoyment. And of course, as we explained, within each of these little triangles, there's still lots of scope for variation and individualization within their template. So the overall set of all these avatar species represents the pool of potential for the Atmas as cosmic players. Now the set is permanent, they are always available, therefore, but they're not all to be used, or not all actually used in the same place at the same time. They serve all the levels of the game, not just necessarily the one that I'm kind of aware of. And they serve all the cycles of circumstances that each level may go through over time. So in this way, a typical VR game produces its own set of potential avatars that the players can choose from. Here's a batch of really cool looking characters from Ready Player Me. And as we know, the world online, in games and in social media, offers the chance to recast ourselves in a new persona. And so for this analysis of the analogy, let's suppose we have the choice of how to begin. When we enter the game, we have, the first thing we do is to define our character. We're offered options within this kind of pool of potentials. Who do you want to be? What do you want to be? And we're offered opportunities to vary those in certain ways. And this kind of opportunity of a new persona kind of gives us the chance to be more than we are. Or at least it gives us the sense or the illusion of that we can become an improved or empowered state of our version of ourselves. But really a virtual reality can only be less than we actually are, because it's an additional layer of selfhood that we cover ourselves with, and we very quickly identify with it, but we as the conscious self, the Atma, even within our current biological body, we already identify ourselves as this actor on the stage of awareness. We've already got that first covering of Ahankara persona that we've talked about. So this is the first covering of our conscious selfhood. And it's a kind of form of avatar that we've adopted in the game of this playing in this universe. It's an adopted persona defined by all the various factors which mostly related to my outward body. You know, I think of myself as I'm human, I'm male, I'm older, I'm got a particular race and from a certain place and background and so on. So when we're playing within a VR game, we choose characteristics and behavior to be the persona of our avatar, but we are not that persona. And the same is true of the conscious entity identifying with the persona of our mind and our body. It may be who we think we are for now, but it is not who we are in actuality. Now our avatars act as a kind of an overlay of with a new batch of senses in the virtual reality world. So not only are we fed imagery and sounds through, say, a headset, but with certain setups, with these kind of gloves and what do you call exoskeleton tactile gadgets, it can feel that our hands are touching a virtual object. So this one is shown here modeling what it might be like if I was actually touching the statue of the lion, because it adjusts tension and the length of the wires going to my fingertips, and the mind associates the feel of the fingers with the image it sees, and it generates the impression that the user is actually touching a physical object. We become very easily fooled by that. So currently, of course, we experience the world via what our senses feed into our minds, and how our minds then process and present that to us. Our senses do not always get the complete data or get it right, and our mind speculates and adds a batch of overlays, generating the final sensory experience that we as the conscious entity accept as being true and real and valid. And we can often get it wrong. Our senses can let us down, our mind can let us down in that. But whatever the actual reality, like the person with the VR apparatus, we, the Atma, are receiving it via these limitations of our senses and mind. But we aren't saying that there isn't an actual reality. There is. And I make the point that it takes a lot of reality in order to create virtual experience of reality. Now, I want to tell you a story. Last year I was involved with the architects designing the extension to our centre in Cardiff, and they had arranged a VR setup in their office to give us a sense of what it would be like to explore the various spaces that we had designed together for this new extension. So it was like in this image, I was standing there in this kind of shed and seeing the new design, and I was able to move around and see the spaces just as if they were built. And this allowed us to make a few design alterations and improve how the spaces were going to be used. Now, at one point, while I was immersed in this simulation, only for a few minutes, I heard the architects speaking beside me. So I naturally turned around within the VR space, expecting to see them in the virtual scene. Surprise, they weren't there. And it showed me just how easy it is to forget where you are in reality. So games provide an environment that, although not physical, counts as a sort of objective reality, in that it is a common landscape that all the players of that game get to inhabit and move about in. Now, we say objective, but it is a landscape that is devised and updated by incorporating the intentions of the players, firstly in the original format of the landscape, and secondly in allowing ongoing modifications to be made by players as part of the game, like you would in a sort of world building game like Civilization. And thirdly, games also issue updates of their intrinsic environments to incorporate feedback from their customers. Now, I suggest that the universe has similar features. but that the universe is actually real and present. Prakriti provides an actual real environment of landscape and objects, but as we have pointed out, it is not 100% objective. We as participants, prior to and during our time within the universe, are contributing to its manifestation within the limits that the universe allows us. But also, like good VR experiences, the universe has a subjective aspect to it. Each of these players in this image are participating with the same common sort of objective reality of the same game. But each one is being fed individualized data about who they are, where they are, what's in front of them, and what threats they face. So in the same way, each of us as singular Atmas is fed an individualized experience of Prakriti reality, thanks to how our individual minds present the world and events to us. So in terms of the Atma's relationship with the world is real. It exists. It is factually there. We experience it with our senses because the world and its objects are really manifest, and our real senses are in contact with those objects and their properties. And our impression of this real world is that it is objective reality, meaning that it appears to us to be manifest and to be what it is regardless of our involvement. And that impression arises from the fact that we're each very small players in a very big universe. And my contribution to overall reality seems tiny in comparison to the cosmos. And it also seems very localized just to what I'm doing with my body and things I'm moving around. And it also comes from the fact that we don't recognize our non-temporal nature, and we don't recognize our agency and how our will and intention is incorporated into the reality of existence. Hence, although appearing objective, the real world, like a VR game version, is a hybrid of objective and participative reality. It is partly devised and manifest for us, but also incorporates features arising from our initial and ongoing input of intention. So the systems of the universe and the manifestation of all the forms of Prakriti allow for continual feedback and contribution to the manifestation of each new moment. And yet, this larger objective participative common reality presents itself to us as an individualized subjective experience. For instance, as I sit here, there's a little fly buzzing around in the room. We share the same environment, yet I've got no idea what the fly is actually subjectively enjoying or feeling. Its experience is very different to mine. So our experiences of qualia, and you remember qualia from earlier, these are the qualities of things as we experience them within our minds, imagery, sound, taste, and so on. So our experiences of qualia differ. And this is true also for humans and other species, and it's true for humans and other humans, because each of us may see the same scene differently. I might walk into a situation and see it as welcoming. Someone else might arrive at the same scene, see exactly the same setup, and think this is threatening. Now, someone might ask that if we're each fed an individualized set of images, i.e. as in a virtual reality game or in real life, maybe that's all there is, just the subjectivity. Amazingly, Vedanta scholars of old addressed this very question, the same thing. Is there just the subjectivity of the mind, or is there also a physical reality that the mind is accessing? And the Vedanta's take on this was that each person's subjective experience is rooted in a common objective platform of reality. And this allows the Atmas to interact and share common situations and events. Because if we were each having our own subjective experience and it had bore no relation to anyone else, there'd be no interaction. But because our subjective experience is of a common reality, we share things. We have to communicate. We have to interact. And why is the universe set up in that way? Because the Vedantists say the most important aspect of cosmic play, and you probably heard this from teachers and parents, is to encourage socialization, cooperation, and relationships. So this is quite an incredible combination. The experience of both a common participative platform, but overlaid with my own individualized subjectivity. So it's reality perfectly crafted to apply to me, my needs, my intentions, my desires and deserves, but allowing me to exercise my will, to control, to create, to subjugate, to be the master of my domain, but always reminding me that I share the game with others. Now, how much agency do I have in the VR world? Certainly, the feel for the player is meant to be that they are in control. Like this guy, he's got the steering wheel, he turns the wheel, and his sense of where he is on the road changes. He uses the pedal to accelerate, to slow down. Things happen according to what he thinks he's doing. Everything responds nicely and predictably for him. But in effect, all he does with those instruments is to convey his wishes to the computer. He turns the wheel, but that doesn't change the scene. He turning the wheel just sends data into the computer, and it is his intention, I want the scene to go right or left. So he is the doer only as far as he expresses will, but these interface instruments just convey his will and convert it into digital data, send it to the computer, and it's the computer that works out what things will be. So it's the computer that is manifesting his experience, but it is taking his intentions into account. Now, in the same way, the Atma expresses will that seems to directly cause things to happen. I want to pick up an object, and nature, through my mind and body, arranges that the signals are sent to my arm to move into position and my hand grasps the object. Now, we take that ability for granted, but it's kind of like the old fable about the caterpillar. So a friendly ant with 6 legs asked the caterpillar, "How do you walk with so many legs? Which do you move first?" The caterpillar thought about it, and he was never able to walk again. In the same way, we don't actually manipulate matter, not even with our bodies, not directly. We desire, we will, and somehow it happens, it is arranged for us. And it works through the process we have talked about last week. We see the current image of the world, we respond, we send new intentional data, ... back to the substrate, the field of aggregated intention. Nature's system crunches that data and works out how that intention is to be facilitated and manifest. It then generates the outcome on the screen the next moment for us to experience. We therefore mistakenly think we are the doers moving our bodies. And that's a kind of conditioned limitation that we have put on ourselves. But our metaphysical model shows that that's not the only way in which things can be moved or manipulated. For instance, the Yoga Sutras explain that yogis who have developed their knowledge of the processes underlying reality no longer identify themselves in terms of the physical body. They realize that they're a conscious entity with a non-physical mind, but this mind that they have perfect control of thanks to their yoga practice. And they understand that there is a direct connection between their mind and intelligence that they control and the cognitive stuff that holds all the aggregated intention. This enables them to then consciously upload their own intention and prioritize it within aggregated intention. So they're able to prioritize its activation, setting up the chain of actions to manifest whatever they want in a way that is inexplicable or inconceivable to the rest of us. And according to the Yoga Sutras and other texts, the yogis develop a whole set of powers that they can get objects from a distance, they can create new objects to appear, they can create out of nothing, they can levitate, they can become immovable, they can almost achieve anything they want. Now, without meaning any disrespect to the yogis, one way to think of what they are doing is a sort of cyber hacking. They found a backdoor into the data files of the cosmic game, and they're manipulating that data to manifest the stuff that they want and overriding all the usual processes that are going. So hackers, maybe. But the difference is, of course, that the yogic powers are legal under universal laws, and in fact they're a reward for tuning into aggregated intention. But the Vedas also offer another system, And this involves the recitation of PRAKRITI-based mantras. These are sound vibrations which are intended to manifest and manipulate matter. And as always, it starts with the focused intention of the practitioner. And then these mantras have to be precisely recited. Now, in this case, what's happening is that there's coherence between the activation of Prakriti by intention and the guna data content represented within the recited sound vibration of the mantra. So the sound vibration, as we spoken by skilled reciters, contains guna data, and the mantra itself contains the tanmatra of subtle sound. And this combination of activation of Prakriti, the guna data of the sound vibration, and the tanmatric sound within the mantra acts to get the field of aggregated intention activated, and the encoded guna data within the mantra manipulates the manifestation of tanmatra and mahabhuta elements, and you can manifest, change or move objects as specified by the mantra. Now, I appreciate that many of us haven't really come across these type of skills or mantras in action, but I mention them here to show that within this other broader picture of how reality works, there's all sorts of other possibilities which could be exploited. And on that note, I wanted to speak more on the abundance and manifestation. I promised to do this last week. How to become rich, famous, successful, whatever you want. Now, we have said that intention turns into manifestation. So could this be used to improve one's personal life? Yeah, I think so. But not in the simplistic, naive way that's been sold in these books, Think and Go Rich, 7 Laws of Attraction, The Secret and all that lot. Because every thought and desire we have is fed into the total aggregate. But the ones that really count are those desires and intentions that resonate with our core convictions about ourself, who we are. They need to be, they are as intentions that are intrinsic with our sense of selfhood, deep within the Ahankara persona and the buddhi. So it isn't just a matter of expressing some casual mental aspiration. Nature wants to know what's really going on inside you. So for instance, if I say, I want to be rich, I deserve to be rich, I will be rich, I'm going to be rich, I must be rich. Sounds like good, positive affirmations. But what I've really communicated to the universe is my core belief that I'm poor, I'm lacking, and I'm not appreciative of what I do have, and so on. And in those cases, what happens is the universe just responds by handing more of the same problems that I've got. So people take these manifestation practices too cheaply, and there are better ways to develop yourself and find happiness and satisfaction in this world. Now, many years ago, a clever guy put an advert in the paper saying, send me £1 and I'll reveal to you my secret of gaining wealth. So lots of people contacted him and paid their £1. And he wrote back with one word, work. So whether in the VR or real world, we tend to believe we can improve our situation by working hard. Get money, get this, achieve this, or you come across the tokens of Tarjan, whatever they are, and swap them for all sorts of the weapons and things you need. Now this idea that I can gain wealth and possessions by graft consolidates our sense of being the doer, and it increases possessiveness and attachment for what we've achieved and what we want. And none of that is really helpful or compatible with our status as a non-temporal conscious Atma. So players in the virtual reality world perhaps can appreciate that any result from their efforts comes from the rules of the game and how it is set up to reward the players for their actions. And that is something useful we should appreciate about this world as well, that there are rules of the universe and how it rewards us. So yes, personal effort can be rewarded. Or you can be rewarded for achieving some kind of mission or quest. But there's also other factors. For instance, there are many multiplayer team games, and some of them reward cooperative activity. But they get you to work together with others. But typically, And typically most people believe that they are good at heart. So psychological studies indicate that the vast majority of people regard themselves as more moral and ethical than the average. How does that work out in average terms? So unfortunately, this veneer of civil behaviour in society is very thin. And we saw that people recently fighting in the supermarkets or hugging all the toilet rolls. So there's peace and stability amongst us as long as our needs don't conflict. But invariably at times we find ourselves battling over finite resources, and we're trying to gain control, dominion and advantage over others. So unfortunately in life we develop this idea that the game of life is a zero-sum calculation. For me to gain, you must lose. Now, we also extend this selfishness to the needs of my family, my community, or my nation. So it's not surprised that by far the most popular VR games are those that pit one player against other players, or one group of players against another group. And in this way, it does reflect the interactions of real life, where I put myself, my group, my family, and our needs first. Now, some VR games try to consider the qualities of the player's action and incorporate rewards and demerits, particularly based on the quality of the interactions with other players. That when we do things that benefit others, the game recognises that spirit of generosity and altruism and rewards us with something gained or some extra advantage or enjoyment. And when we do things which disadvantage others, the game returns the hurt to them or harm that we've caused to others, and it returns that to us as some form of demerit or loss or disadvantage to us. And this is the basic principle that most people associate with the idea of karma. And I think it's really fascinating how many people have an inbuilt intuition about karma. You know, one time in my work with the BBC, we met with the scriptwriters of the most popular soap opera here in the UK. And we were there to discuss the portrayal of ethics in TV dramas. And these scriptwriters explained to us that they always had to be mindful to balance storylines to ensure that the baddie eventually gets his or her comeuppance. They said that people will not watch these continuous drama programs over many years if they don't believe the scriptwriters ultimately arrange that good wins out and bad is being punished. Somehow, and this is I'd say in contradiction to the Darwinian picture of life, humans hold this belief that the universe should be a fair place. Now, many people feel it hasn't been fair to them personally, but that still reinforces the point that we as humans intuitively believe that the universe is meant to be fair. Now, karma is rarely instant or immediate or even obvious, but I find that there's this broad acceptance of the concept of karma, and that the world, the idea the world must balance out the effects of our actions. But it's important not to have a simplistic view of what is essentially a simple principle, because karma is not a straightforward linear process. It's not as simple as one action here, guy pushing over the block, and it sets off a chain of reactions, one on one, returning to us at some point in the future. I think karma is better understood using another high-tech example: big data. Big data involves the gathering and crunching of all pertinent information relating to a subject. And this process differs from standard logical systems, for instance, in how it deals with particular questions. An example is, what do cats eat? Logical linear analysis goes, cats are animals, and they're a specific subcategory of animals, carnivores. Carnivores eat meat, therefore the conclusion is that cats eat meat. But when you ask AI the same question, it turns every bit of data that it can find of cat owners' shopping habits, clicks on adverts, social media, whatever. And big data concludes that 60% of cats eat tin food, 20% eat leftovers, 10% eat local birds, 2% eat Rice Krispies, and the rest is miscellaneous. So the same question answered by different methods. And I'd say the same way the universe crunches all the data that might arise from our actions to include the guna data related to the original action and the intention behind that, and the circumstances, and the extrapolation of all effects and consequential actions, reactions on the perpetrator and everyone else involved, and all those whose paths will cross with us in the future. And also with regard to their desires and their karmic issues. Plus, it's got to bear in mind any mitigating process that the perpetrator and anyone else might undergo. You know, mitigation such as apology, recompense, begging forgiveness, restitution, or acceptance of immediate punishment, or some form of absolution. That's an awful lot to balance on all of that. Which is why I remember 15 years ago hearing one scientist on the radio say that he couldn't accept karma because it's far too complicated for the universe to administer, how it would work and all this. I don't know if you'd say that now, because if you think about the advancement of all the surveillance and data processing technology in recent years, it actually seems quite feasible that we might soon be monitoring and responding to the actions of every human on this planet. And if puny humans have come so far in a few decades, don't underestimate the system that's built into the universe. The universe doesn't require a separate monitoring or reactionary system. All our thoughts, desires, intentions, and actions are already part of the fabric that manifests reality. Karma is not an add-on, it is intrinsic to the way that material nature manifests in response to our intentions and actions. And the aggregate, this aggregation of all intentions, that's held within the buddhi aspect of the cognitive functions, and the imprints of every action by every entity are preserved within the Akashic information field. And all of this is used to update the guna data for all future moments. And that can balance off all the karmic merits and demerits in due course. Now, this process doesn't make the future fixed or inevitable, it's not fatalistic. This updating is dynamic and ongoing. It's based on our actions and intentions and everything in each new moment. And it doesn't remove or diminish or constrain our free will. Within the human form, we always retain the ability to respond freely to whatever circumstances we encounter. Now, any game needs to immerse its players in a story, and which is the narrative of how they're going to handle the quest or the challenges. And for any good story, there needs to be an element of jeopardy. Jeopardy is an important thrill of playing VR games. You are playing to win, to conquer, but there may be a price to pay. You could lose credits, slip a level, and in many action games, jeopardy ends in one way, the big one. Game over. So within the game, as within real life, the jeopardy of death puts a price on our actions. And at least for most of us, it mitigates our behaviour towards ourselves, our body and others. Impending mortality encourages us to be more attentive to the welfare of our own bodies and also to think more caringly about the well-being of others. Obviously, game players know that they won't actually die in the game, but the illusion and the identification and the attachment is so strong that it's reported how many gamers undergo real feelings of trauma having been killed in virtual reality, because they've invested so much in their avatar persona. They've tried so hard to achieve their goals. They've amassed fortunes, tokens and weapons. And now it's all gone, finished. Just like in real life. But neither the real life player nor the conscious Atma is ever actually annihilated. The outer shell of our avatar or our biological body may be no more. But we, the conscious entity, persist, as do our hopes and aspirations, and we still have many more desires to fulfill. Fortunately then, the universe offers us the chance to play again. Now we've survived and we're back in action. So death in the game, in the virtual reality game, offers opportunity for change. Because imagine you started your first VR game and chose your avatar, and after playing it for some time you think, you'd like to try something different. But the game says, no, you've got to stick with the avatar you have. In the same scenario you're in, and it's forever. There's no chance of ending it or changing it. The joy of such immortality would soon wane, because as Atmas, we demand variety. We don't want to drive the same car forever. We don't want to have the same phone or computer or laptop forever. We want to change things and to experience new situations. So in both the VR and the real world, death is the required facility for such change, for a new start in a new setting, to pursue desires that are yet to be filled in a new kind of body that we have. So the option to play again is a good metaphor for reincarnation, a topic we've touched on before. And like karma, seems to enjoy quite widespread belief in popular culture. And here's a little lad telling his granddad, yeah, well, I didn't believe in reincarnation when I was your age either. Now, perhaps for some it seems the best way to understand how the universe balances out matters of karma. And because it doesn't all have to happen within one lifetime, which would be seemingly impossible. Now, we've presented it in terms of the nature of the non-temporal Atma and wishing to continue the experiences afforded within embodied lives. So just like gamers wishing to play again, either along the same lines or trying something new with a different avatar, the universe also offers us new opportunities, a new type of species avatar, which doesn't necessarily have to be human, because as we pointed out in the big game of the universe existence, there are many options, 8.4 million of these avatars that we can play with. And like many VR games, which avatar we takes up depends on a few key factors: what we want to experience and what we have to pay with, the credits that we have. So imagine we're playing a particular game, we're developing ideas of what we'd like to experience next in the game. We're amassing lots of new desires to add to all our older ones. So when we get to this game over, want to play again, our personal stack of intentions has developed to match a particular type of avatar or species type. It's likely that some of all our intentions are going to define where our mind reposes at that moment at the end of this life. And where that is defines which type of body we get next time round. So many Atmas who've cultivated interests appropriate to a human body may get to continue life within another human form. It seems to be what they would like to do and what is appropriate for them. But many others might find that their interests are better facilitated in the bodies of other species. And although there may be millions of species, those on planet Earth are said to fall into three broad categories of states of consciousness. There is conscious awareness for the Atmas even within microbes and plants and trees. But this is described as a chadata chaitana, heavily covered. It's like you've got the consciousness of the Atma like a lamp, but there's a thick blanket thrown over it, so almost nothing shines through, it's covered. Still the Atma in that situation gets to experience and to some degree enjoy life. And then we have Atmas within insects and reptiles, birds and the aquatics. They experience shrunken consciousness, sankuchita chaitana. Now, there is a gradation from a severely shrunken state of the aquatics, and we exclude the cetacean mammals, through to the less shrunken state for birds and ultimately land animals and primates. So this term shrunken is really relative to the consciousness state available within the human body. And the human level is called budding, or mukulata chaitana, which mukul means the bud of a plant. So it has the potential to bloom into something beautiful. And we're going to talk more about the human level of consciousness in due course. Now, we might think that nothing in the animal, bird or aquatic realms can compare with the human body. And why would we ever want one? And yeah, the human body has special features, capability and intelligence. But it also comes with a lot of baggage, responsibilities, worries, and a constant sense of mortality. So for many Atmas, and perhaps for ourselves in the past, many times, the freedoms of another species are attractive. And these non-human avatars have one great advantage over the human. There's no karmic liability within an animal form. The Atmas in both the covered and shrunken states do not incur karmic reactions for any of their activities. They're simply acting out karmic credits and demerits by experiencing the pains and the pleasures of their lives within those kind of avatar species forms. They get to enjoy sensual activities without moral concerns. They can fight, kill, and eat others without a troubled conscience. And one good example of what the Atma can get up to in a non-human body is this. It is the PARASITOID WASP. And this is the creature cited by Darwin as his example of the brutality of nature and why he could not accept the idea of a benevolent creator. The female wasp ambushes a caterpillar or a beetle and lays its eggs inside it. The eggs hatch out and the larvae start eating the beetle from the inside, drinking its blood to paralyze it, then eating its organs, carefully avoiding the vital ones, so the beetle remains alive and fresh until eventually the larva burst out, killing it. And that must be excruciatingly terrible for this poor beetle. So that's one takeaway. Another point that a biologist like Darwin should have asked himself is, how do these newly hatched larvae know what bits to eat of the beetle without killing it? How does nature provide that knowledge? Anyway, there are many examples of seeming cruelty amongst the animal world, but these creatures are not, they don't see themselves as cruel, they are simply following the nature of their particular embodiment. Now, we can recognize that, each one of us sometimes gets the desire to hurt another entity, but we resist mostly. And certain animal bodies almost seem designed to facilitate this will to inflict pain without compunction. And if this is the nature of certain atmas and their desires, it's better that such cruel intentions are acted out in the bodies of wasps and other lower species than facilitated amongst humans. Now, how does the Atma end up there amongst the animal species? Well, when an Atma has a preponderance of unfulfilled desires best suited to being accommodated within these lower species, the Atma drops many levels down to the lowest point of its desires. Then, according to those desires and the karma that they have, they trace out a path back up through the various species, each time kind of expunging our store, a little bit of the store of desires and paying off some old karma. And with each experience in that lower avatar form, and our consciousness is gradually being awakened so that we are suited to the next step in the process, the next level of species awareness. And over what may be millions and millions of lifetimes, from one species to another, sometimes spending many times within one species perhaps, depends on the situation, we make our way back up to the human level. So this concept of reincarnation through various species was the basis for the original game of snakes and ladders, sliding back on a snake or moving quickly up a few levels on a ladder. Now, we've talked about going down the levels amongst the animal species, but in the game of life there's also the chance of moving up. And many VR games incorporate different levels to be explored, and because advancement and success within one level may grant you access to a higher level in the game which you had previously no awareness of, no understanding of what it would be like. And descriptions of the universe within the Vedas offer a similar picture. Currently we experience existence in terms of the level of humans here on Earth, and we look out and see planets and we kind of think of ourselves in a particular situation, but maybe there are other levels that could be available to us. And if so, what would they be like? What sort of environment would there be there? What sort of beings would inhabit those other levels? Would they be the same as us with carbon-based biology? Or would their bodies have some other composition, ethereal, psychic, or celestial, whatever? And are these levels apparent to us in any way at the moment? Or are they hidden from our perception? Do they involve additional or different dimensions? Is our experience of them like the story of Flatland? So being conditioned in our present bodies, we have a hard time imagining what life as a jellyfish is like, never mind trying to understand what life on higher levels might be, what sort of powers or abilities or duration of life these kind of entities would have. And are there processes by which we might reach those and take on forms suitable for those realms? Well, the Vedic texts suggest that there are. It just requires a lot of karma credit. And if the game programmers wanted to explain to you what's on offer within their game, on your current level and also other levels, they might provide a diagram or map. Now, there's different maps that they could provide. One of them might be the map of the environment that you are now in. And yep, here I am, I know where I am, I can make sense of that. I'm surrounded by familiar features that I've encountered and can see. But if the map looked like this, my location, of course, is still included within the overall map, but the map also contains kind of geography or features that do not compute with my current perception because it's involving these different layers. So I may not realize that it is a useful depiction of the various levels of the game and the reality that could be accessible to me. Or I could be given a map that tells me where I really am, sitting on my chair in front of the screen. Anyway, we've discussed how each of us contributes intention to the overall aggregate and thereby influences how the world manifests. Now, not all Atmas have the same potency of intention. Some seem to have far greater ability to specify reality than we little humans do. There's a sort of hierarchy of agency. And let me use the example of the field reg device to suggest how this might work. Field reg is the random event generator that I used. If you remember, I showed you this printout, and it was to represent the emotions of the Welsh football supporters during their match with Portugal. So in this effect, it meant that what happened was the collective intention of these football supporters had been harnessed and used, without their knowledge or consent, to produce an actual new physical effect on the field reg device. That's pretty amazing. To be able to take something as ephemeral as emotion and turn it into some form of physical reality. Now, what sort of powerful creature or entity could be responsible for that? Well, I did. I used my intention to harness the intention of others. Now, I'm not claiming any special power because I'm just saying this is the way reality works. My point is that if I can do it, then just consider how it might be possible for entities on other levels of our game or the cosmic universe to manipulate intentions on a grand scale, on a cosmic scale. And we would regard those who can do that as gods compared to us, certainly demigods, or as the Vedas refer to them, devas or devatas. These are players at the very highest levels of the cosmic game, and they act as representatives of the game programmers and designers. They help to administer the rules and outcomes of the game at all the other levels. Now that might seem like a bit of a chore, but it's part of the responsibility that allows them the powers and freedoms to be the big players in the cosmos. Perhaps like we humans play at building businesses and enterprise and civilizations. They also enjoy the challenges and thrill of creating things on an even grander scale. And it seems from some of the Vedic texts that they also get to enjoy these responsibilities. Now, for instance, in part 3, I represented the process by which new species manifest on Earth, talking about the subtle state of coherent group intention, and I described how that manifested a new species, a punctuated appearance of a new species. And I described that process as a sort of mechanical or automatic process of nature. That's true, that's valid. But the Puranas suggest that the Devatas might also be involved in this. They may assist the process, and they may be doing it as much for fun as obligation. And because there are descriptions that certain male and female devatas take on the subtle form of the guna species type. And so this is a guna species type that is required in a certain level within the cosmos. So they take on the guna species type subtly, and they visit those lower areas, such as planet Earth. And here these devatas manifest the physical form related to that guna species type. And in that physical form, they enjoy intercourse and produce a whole new population of that species. So, although we may think we have little interaction with these beings at higher levels, the Vedas describe that they are involved with us. They're like intermediaries between ourselves at the lower levels and the program designers and creators. And they also explain the processes by which humans can propitiate them in various ways. You can buy credits from them. You can use those credits for better karma in this life. You may even get them to help you give you elevation to some of those higher levels. But even if you reach those higher levels, it's not easy to remain there. We aren't accruing new credits. We're just using up all our good ones. And so in the big game of snakes and ladders, even if we get to those levels, we return to our previous level of karmic life. And this cycle is called the Great Wheel of Samsara. And like some unfortunate gamer, we are lost in this world of illusory reality, seemingly forever destined to wander between these levels, sometimes in human avatar form, sometimes working our way through a sequence of lives as plants and animals, sometimes visiting the higher realms, but always on this seemingly endless cycle, up and down, round and round. And over all the many times we play this game, there's going to be a certain dissatisfaction appearing in our hearts. The pleasures of the game don't always outweigh the pains. Even the best enjoyment that we obtain seems lacking. So in the VR world, whatever powerful avatar we obtain for ourselves, it's a pale imitation of our real self. The avatar can never represent ourselves in terms of conscious perception, our personality, expression of ourselves, or our sensory experiences. VR may thrill, it may intrigue us, but it cannot stimulate the most vital of all experiences, the one that rises deep from our conscious being, and that is love. In virtual reality, one player can establish a sort of relationship with another, but if my avatar in the game is a pale imitation of my real self, and I'm interacting with another pale attention of another real person, then what depth of actual connection and affinity can we establish within the game? So the same is true for the Atma having covered itself with the character of Ahankara. Our Ahankara persona is a construct that cannot represent fully our nature as a dynamic, conscious being with everything that we have to offer. And we find ourselves then relating to others in terms of their projected Ahankara personas. So here, the emotional experiences we obtain, we may call them friendship, love and intimacy, but they are well short of what we expect and need to experience as an awakened conscious being. So amidst this dissatisfaction and frustration, what if we had come to believe that our virtual reality game was the real thing, that it was everything, and that there is no way out, and that the experiences were horrible, and that we couldn't change them, and we can't ever get free from this, we're trapped. We've lost sight of the truth, that we might not even survive the end of our avatar character. We think we may be going to die, to be extinguished forever. So VR is captivating, but it hasn't reached that degree of illusion yet. But even so, you still come across these dystopian films and shows which explore this very scenario of a person being trapped forever in a virtual reality world of computer simulation. What happens then? What's the only way out? We need someone from the outside to come in to help us. Someone who themselves is not bewildered by the illusion. Someone who can tap us on the shoulder and suggest, you've had enough. Time to come out of this game world. Get back to real reality. Get out and play in the sun. This, I feel, is perhaps the most important of the parallels that we can draw from this very extended analogy of VR gaming. The possibility that non-temporal, non-physical consciousness might have the ability to experience existence outside of and beyond this universe or any universe, to get out of the game, to become free. So the question we are now asking is, what is the nature of consciousness in its free state? Consciousness without the requirement or inclination to undergo second-hand experiences, secondary experiences involving the limitations of a physical body and the vagaries of our minds. So what is the actual potential of the free Atma? Now this might seem to take us into a realm of conjecture, but still I believe there's scope for applying logic and rationality to help us address this question. And that is going to be our topic for next week. Consciousness in its free state. And this will include an exploration of the concept of Brahman. So join us live, same time on Thursday, 17th of December, 6 o'clock UK time. And please, if you've got any questions, write to us at info@s-pi.org. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.